So I wanted to talk a little bit about the story, the myth of Adam and Eve in Genesis, and what I think it really means, and how I think it's kind of widely misinterpreted in a way because it contradicts a lot of what comes after that part of the Bible. I think the thing that's often not thought about enough is the precise nature of the original sin. And to be clear, I'm not a biblical literalist. I think that this myth is an allegory for all of our lives, that essentially we're all born into the Garden of Eden, and as we mature, in inverted commas, we get thrown out for whatever reason and find ourselves in a world that feels flawed, imperfect, problematic, difficult, and full of suffering. And how does that happen? And instead of asking ourselves, is the story of Adam and Eve true or false, perhaps maybe thinking about what truths can we find in the story of Adam and Eve. And I think what I arrived at was a focus on the precise nature of the original sin, which is eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and why that's so problematic. If you believe that God is omnipresent and that everything is God, then the whole idea of evil becomes unworkable, actually, because you start saying, this part of reality, the bit that I like, the rainbow and the beautiful trees and flowers, that's God. But that stuff over there, the cockroaches, the rapists, the nuclear weapons, all of that is not God. And that doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense to say the whole of the universe is God except what humans do. Nothing can be separated from God. I hate that word. But yeah, nothing can be separated from reality. And so if you're saying God is in it all and God is perfect, reality must be perfect, and having faith is having faith precisely that that is the case. There's a famous Chinese Buddhist poem called Faith in Heart Mind, which begins by saying, living is easy for those without preferences. The setting up of for and against, like and dislike, locked in opposition, is the disease of the heart mind. So actually there's something fundamentally problematic from the mystical point of view in this idea of good and evil. It's actually just rooted in like and dislike. It's a kind of emotional, quite childish aversion to some things that make us suffer, and loving of things we enjoy. And that gets in the way of an individual's capacity to see the world as God. This is a weird state of mind you can choose for a time, if you choose as a kind of thought experiment, to look around yourself and pretend that everything you're looking at, even your screen, is God. Everything, because nothing can be outside of God. A Jewish mystic, whose name I typically forget, said, he is within all things, and all things are within him. Aside from the problematic gendered pronoun, I think whatever that concept refers to, whatever you want to call it, it has no name in fact. It does imply that you need to kind of fully accept reality as it is, and by doing so, you accept God. This is a bit of a problem, though, for many Christians who love nothing more than feeling that they do know what is good and evil. And this is the paradox, that the first thing it says in the Bible is that we cannot know what good and evil is, and that we shouldn't think that we know. And the rest of the Bible is full of people claiming that they do know. They're claiming that they know what God thinks is right and wrong, which is bullshit. It's just bullshit. They were just people. So I'm a kind of I have a strange relationship with the Christian faith. I look for the truth in it, and there is truth in it, but I feel that so much of the rest of Christianity contradicts those truths, and that the behaviour of Christians contradicts those truths so much, because whilst, even Jesus' teachings, about 50% of them were about not judging others. The most judgmental people I've met in my life have all been Christians, self-righteous, telling you what they think you should and shouldn't do based on very selective biblical references. And they're poison. These people are poison. Nothing has done more harm to Christianity than those particular Christians going around with their self-righteousness, telling people they're going to go to hell and be tortured for eternity unless they conform to whatever self-interested bullshit they happen to want them to conform to. Not bitter. There was an early form of Christianity I took an interest in called Atomism. As an Adam myself, I was intrigued, and they actually felt that the purpose of spirituality and religion was to return to the Garden of Eden and enter a state of shamelessness and innocence, because that is how God created Adam and Eve. Shameless. This is interesting, right? A lot of the, especially evangelical Christians I've met, basically live lives crippled by shame that other people have put on them through religion, through traumatic communications based on religious justification. But God intended Adam and Eve, God intended humanity to live without shame. So there's a clear tension here that the Atomists, this early Christian church, wanted to resolve. Apparently they held their church services naked, which is kind of interesting. And I suppose there's a bit of a connection there, because in the New Testament you have this metaphor of the lilies of the field, who are said to neither toil nor spin, and therefore they don't make clothes for themselves. Basically, they kind of bask in the naked glory of their existence as God intended. And this might be a metaphor for the way that our soul is enclothed in our body, and so perhaps we're meant to shed off the artifices that we cling to, and be naked before God in a spiritual sense. Or it could be more literal, and a kind of pro-nudist philosophy. So next time you go to church, feel free to strip off, and you've got a bit of scriptural justification and defense for doing so, because Adam and Eve also were depicted naked. It's only when they were given shame that they felt the need to cover up the gift of shame. I just thought that was a very strange, what do they say, turn of phrase. The gift of shame. Not sure about that. Shame seems to fuck people up quite a lot. But anyway, an interesting thing about the story is that the whole thing begins with Eve. She's the first to think she knows what's good and evil, and she kind of then gets Adam to eat the fruit. So I wonder if there's a bit of a kind of gender thing here, and it does seem, I don't know, to what extent are our modern ideas about what is good and evil, what is right and wrong, basically mainly coming from women more than men. This is my subjective experience of it, that women seem to shout louder and have maybe a bit more control over the social matrix, over the shame matrix, than men do, who seem to often live lives full of shame about who they are and all of that. And the nature of the punishments are interesting as well. It's only because people have these or think they know what right and wrong is, that men are enslaved in working for their whole lives, and women are having children and enduring the pains of childbirth. It kind of makes you think that if you didn't have those ideas about right and wrong, you might not have kids, thus avoiding the pain of childbirth. It's not rocket science. And you might not spend your whole life working so much out of these kind of weird ideas about what right and wrong is. And the other thing is, the original sin is said to be passed down through like the male line, literally through semen, which is, I mean, aside from that just being bizarre, a part of me wonders if this is a really kind of ancient metaphor. Well, not that it is an ancient metaphor, because again, we're looking for the truth in this. So what truth can we find? And I wonder if we could construe that as a metaphor for intergenerational trauma. That basically, it's ideas about what is good and what is evil that fundamentally drive intergenerational trauma in a way, because it's so much about what you should be ashamed of, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, what people like and what they don't like. And so we can kind of see how, ideas of what is good and evil, what is right and wrong, as if it's something we can know, which we can't. We can see how they get transferred generation after generation, and in every generation they seem to basically fuck people up in their own precise, nuanced little ways. Whatever those ideas of good and evil are, of what you ought to be ashamed of, basically tends to fuck people up a little bit each time. So anyway, end of my little rant and my thoughts on the story of Adam and Eve. Incidentally, if there are any Eves out there, do feel free to send me a message. I'm an Adam, and every time I've met an Eve, there's been a bit of a problem. The first Eve I met was only recently, and I'm quite old. I mean, I'm middle-aged. I'm like 36 now, and she had a boyfriend. The second one was homosexual, a lesbian, and so that was a small obstacle to us returning to the Garden of Eden together. And the third one was male, because apparently in Romanian the name Eve can be used for guys as well. So I advised the guy that he needs to find a woman called Adam, and kind of left it at that, really. But anyway, I digress my nonsense. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you thought that was interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the story of Adam and Eve, and what you think the truth in that story really is, in the comments section below. Have a lovely day.